I fell in love with Hideaki Anno's Shin Godzilla or Shin Gojira, and I was so excited about Shin Ultraman coming out, Hideaki Anno's next, I guess, reboot tribute film to something he grew up with. Hideaki Anno, the creator of Evangelion, was a huge fan of Ultraman as a kid and actually worked on it when he got a little bit older. Now, unlike Shin Godzilla, it's a bit different here. The director of this film is Shinji Higuchi, who helped with Shin Godzilla as well. But Hideaki Anno does some of the writing, the producing, the editing, and some of the motion capture. So let's talk about Shin Ultraman. So this movie had good and bad points. I want to say first off the bat, this is a non-spoiler review for the film, but I want to talk about it. If you're going to go see it, come back and comment, but I want to give my non-spoiler thoughts. So there are things I liked and things I did not like. This movie is a big love fest to the classic Ultra Q and Ultraman shows. They have characters, they have music, they have scenes that were redone. It's a big, not shot by shot, but there are some shots that are total tributes to the classic Ultraman film. Now, supposedly, Hideaki Anno was supposed to do a trilogy. But at this point, we're not really sure if that's going to happen. Now, when it comes to this movie, first of all, I want to go over some of the actors here. Takumi Saito plays Shinji Kaminaga. He's the main character of the film to a degree. He's the one that sort of inherits the Ultraman powers, and his body is used as a vessel by the Ultraman. That's really what they sort of did with the old stuff as well. Masami Higasawa is Hiroki Asami. She's supposed to be sort of like the female character, like what happened with the Shin Godzilla, but she kind of takes the role as being the main lead for a while in the movie. The thing about the movie is the movie sort of feels like 3 or 4 episodes of Ultraman crammed together. Like there's different sort of sections to the film. It doesn't have like names or anything, but it's clear that it feels like sort of a mini-series put together into a film. Now, this movie, when it comes to the action sequences and the kaiju, it does have a ton of CGI, and so did Shin Godzilla. Shin Godzilla, Gojira in that movie was all CGI. And I didn't know that when I first watched it because they made it look so real. Like they made Godzilla look like it was a practical effect. Not so much a guy in a suit, but it did look like he was a living creature. This film has problems with that because Shin Ultraman does not look real. The way that this is shot, the way it's edited, the way that he moves just doesn't seem to follow physics correctly based on even the older Ultraman stuff. And there's a fight in this movie that's all CGI. I mean, every fight's CGI, but there's one specific one in the middle of the film that looks really dated. Like it looks like CGI from the mid 2000s and not CGI from now. You know, nowadays we have technology to where we can have fights like what we saw in Avengers and different movies like that, where you have CGI that looks authentic and real. It's never going to look 100% real because the human eye can detect that, but real enough. Here with Ultraman, it is distracting that it looks like a cutscene from a PS2 game. Like that does kind of bug me. The big problem I have with the film is that it's really strangely paced and edited. What I mean by that is it's sort of top heavy in that the movie starts out fast, lots of action, kaijus pop up all over the country, and the government establishes the SSSP to combat the kaiju. The SSSP is sort of the main organization. It stands for S-Class Species Suppression Protocol. These kaiju are considered S-Class species. Then Ultraman appears from space to save the day, but there's more to it than that. There were characters that were brought back from the old Ultraman show, and the one that I was pretty surprised about, pleasantly, of course, I think, is the return, or I guess it's not really a return, it's a reboot. Alien Zarab is in this film, and I was surprised to see that. I was quite surprised to see that. The issue for me is that I felt like the movie was kind of anticlimactic. But if you're a fan of Evangelion, so I must say this, if you're a fan of Hideaki Anno's work, you're going to get some of it here. You're going to get a lot of Evangelion here. The final act of the film straight up goes into an end of Evangelion type of situation. And it sort of addresses, I mean, it's throughout the whole film, but the end specifically addresses Shin Ultraman's place in the world as well as humanity's place in the universe. Kind of had a deeper meaning there about what we are and what we can do. On top of that, there was some political commentary, sort of like what they did with Shin Godzilla. Some of that was there, but it wasn't quite as. It wasn't taking the forefront of the story here. It wasn't as prevalent. It felt like it was sort of a critique of how Japan is still under the US's thumb. One of the things that was thematic in Shin Godzilla, but it's not really hammered home. There's the way the movie's structured is, you have different sort of sections, different stories, but not like separated. It's one big movie, but it feels that way sometimes. And there's like a big battle near not, and it's in the second half, but then like the actual finale felt very anticlimactic. I thought it would be better if they bookended it with two big battles. But one thing I will tell you is that the science fiction aspect of this movie, it's science fiction fantasy. The sci-fi aspect of this movie is strong. It's way more science fiction than Shin Godzilla. Shin Gojira was basically a film that was sort of Hideaki Anno saying, what if Godzilla was real, and basing it off of the commentary behind how Japan handled the 2011 nuclear meltdown. Right, we talked about that in my Shin Godzilla review that I have on the channel. But unlike Shin Gojira, this movie does not go in that direction. It's completely over the top. There are aliens coming in, and there's a lot of that government stuff. But I think one of the mistakes they made here is I thought that the way that Hideaki Anno and the whole crew did Shin Gojira, I thought that it was really creative, and I was very, very intrigued by the story, by the human characters. In this movie, they sort of don't have that much Ultraman in it. And I think that kind of hurts the film. I know that there are other things they have to discuss. They really build up the film discussing the beta box. You'll see it when you see the movie. And Zeton, all these different things that are taken in from the old series, sort of redone in a modern sense. But I felt like it was again sort of like my issues with End of Evangelion. It felt like they were trying a bit too hard to send a message while also not really providing a satisfying conclusion based on what I feel it should be. Now again, it's weird for me to say that because I like movies that, sometimes I like movies that sort of don't do what I want them to do. I kind of want to be surprised sometimes and, maybe do a different approach or a different sort of, way of filmmaking. And this is definitely a different way, but it just didn't click for me. This is a very subjective movie. I think fans of Shin Gojira may like it, but they may necessarily not like it because it's not serious like Shin Gojira. And if you watch End of Evangelion, or even Evangelion as a whole, there's a lot of this stuff in there, but Ultraman is still ultimately a wacky superhero in the vein of Superman and characters like that. So it just depends on what you're into and if you like these kinds of thought-provoking films. I'm going to watch it again. I fear it may be a one and done, but I do want to watch it again at least one more time to see if I missed anything, because they really did sort of hammer home a lot of the dialogue near the end. But it does have Anno's, even though Anno's not directing this movie, he's not the director, it's Shinji Higuchi. It does have the thing where there are really unique camera angles. Like, for example, there's a scene where these two characters are at a desk and there's somebody at the head of the table, right? And the shot is from behind his head, and on his left and right shoulder, you can see them talking like in front of him, and they focus on them. That was a beautiful shot. There's a lot of shots in the movie that look good, are unique, dynamic, but ultimately I think it does fall short, in my opinion, of Shin Gojira. It's not on that level. What did you think about Shin Ultraman? If you saw it, it's coming out in theaters at some point, so I look forward to seeing when that happens in the US. But again, there's some stuff that was great, some stuff not really. It didn't click that much for me. The monsters were from the past, and that was cool, but there wasn't enough of them. So that's my view. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.